Okay, guys, good morning and thank you for joining me today. I got off the phone last week with a gal. She had called from the state NRCS office and she asked if I could make a video about failures of no-till. And at first I kind of chuckled and then I thought, that really is a great topic. Because you go to these conferences and the NRCS office puts on these great no-till live demonstrations. They got water infiltrations. They got tons and tons of great information there to show why you should be doing no-till. But their problem is communicating the how. How are you going to set up for no-till? How are you going to see a return on that investment? How are you going to make money on the no-till to keep on farming, to make it a sustainable no-till farm? And so I thought by the time we got off the phone, I'm like, that's kind of a fun topic, and that is a long topic. That is going to be a 2-hour discussion. So I'm going to try and go through this pretty quick to keep you moving along and entertained. Disclaimer 1, I'd like to say it again. I've said it before. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. If you are convinced that no-till doesn't work for you, great. Keep on doing what you're doing. You're just watching because I'm handsome. If you are a guy that has an open mind, might be thinking of moving this way, great. Then keep watching because I'm handsome and you might find a tidbit of information. The other disclaimer is I don't believe in a one-hat kind of program. I've said it before. That field might need no-till, that field might need full-on moldboard, disc chisel, whatever. Every field's different. You got to do what each field needs. We tried it again this year. I tried to do the warm and dry thing for planting by stirring the dirt up, and it meant nothing to my crop as far as soybean yield went and time spent. It meant nothing. I wasted time for nothing. But on the chemical side, I saw this year with the dandelions that it wiped out some dandelion pressure that the no-till field did have. So there's trade-offs. But anyhow, going to no-till, what can you expect? You can expect an unknown. We don't know. Every farm is different. There is land that when you go into no-till, you're going to be like, wow, this is the easiest thing ever. I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I haven't ever taken a step backwards. That farm was just waiting for no-till. There's other farms that are a great candidate for no-till, but there's going to be a learning curve. The soil's really going to change on you. The whole structure, how your implement engages the soil, how your planter runs through the soil is really going to change. And so that's the farm. That's how our farm was. And the first year we did no-till, it was like, this is the simplest thing ever. Why wasn't I doing this years ago? Second and third year come along, and you're like, wait a minute here. There's things happening. I don't understand why I now have to adapt to my soil. I don't understand, and that's where the failures came in. So let's kick it off. Let's get into the action here. The first failure I had was the pin adjust row cleaners. Now the pin adjust row cleaners bolted rigid to the row unit. So any downforce, any time that row cleaner engaged the soil, it took weight away from the row unit. And that might have meant that that row cleaner was actually holding the row unit up and out of the seed depth. You set for 2 inches, you need to be at 2 inches on every seed across that field. That's how corn works. Soybeans are a great no-till plant to get into no-till because they're super forgiving. But that pin adjust, so you got the transfer of weight back and forth between that row cleaner as it nicks a hump in the dirt. It's going to lift that row unit sometimes out. Well, now you've got a bad spot in that stand. The other part with them was rocks. They brought a lot of impact into the row unit itself, where a floating row cleaner might have just kind of bounced over that rock that was kind of buried. That pin adjust rigid row cleaner kind of hit that rock and just kaboom. All that force goes into the row unit. It's hard on the parallel arms and the bushings and everything. And it might have been enough that now it popped that rock up and out. So now you have to worry about that if you're in a soybean field. That's about it for negatives of the rigid mounted row cleaners. Just them couple things. So we ran them for a couple years. It was a frustrating part. Well, that's not the biggest downfall is that they are rigid. So on the headlands where I have harder soil or heavier soil on the flat, you could adjust the pin adjust so it's just barely nicking the dirt, kind of getting 90% of the residue out of the way. As you went up into the sand, now that barely nicking the dirt is actually moving dirt, which meant the row unit started to go down, which meant the row cleaner moved more dirt. And so it eventually just go down and furrow its way in. And at first, my first year I saw that happen, I'm like, wow, it is really doing a fantastic job of cleaning all that trash. Look at how beautiful that looks behind the planter. And it looked great. The problem was several weeks later, that little corn started to come out of the ground, and then we got some rains, and it washed that ridge of dirt on the side back on top, and it killed that stretch of corn. And so when we went up over the hill, you would have 10 feet in this row, and a couple rows over another 10-foot chunk, and then a couple rows over another 10-foot chunk. And so you just had these scattered chunks of missing field or missing crop over this sand ridge because it all got washed over. So we went to floating trash whips on the new planter, on the white 9222, which is a great planter, by the way. So we went to that. The floating row cleaners were tremendous. I spent 1/1,000,000th the time I did on the pin adjust getting them set. Basically, I pulled in the field, set the planter down, let the row units engage the soil where they need to be, and then just set so the row cleaner just kind of touched the dirt and then found the proper hole for how much engagement in the soil I wanted, and we're off and running. Plain and simple. It's just that quick. The rest of the time, the row cleaner is floating, following the dirt, not taking any weight away from the row unit. Now in tilled soil, talking about the weight in the row unit. In tilled soil, the ground is soft, it's loose, it's very mobile. So the planter has no problem cutting that V slot, and it has no problem closing that. The closing wheels kind of pinch the walls and close that V slot. In no-till, we're going to gain soil structure. It carries load better. We don't have compaction, but it's firmer. It's kind of a trade-off there. It's kind of hard to understand at first until you're there. So what happens is, in the conventional till, we never had down pressure on the row units. We just planted. You just drove out there. In no-till, the first year we tried it, we just drove out there, and the row units you'd watch are doing this back there. They're bumping and bouncing all over as they kind of dive in, get to depth, and then they'd kind of come out and back to depth and come out. So then we added some down pressure springs. I put some heavy duty Kinsey down pressure springs, and we sucked them suckers down. They weren't very easy to adjust. There was no rate. There was nothing telling me how much weight I have. And so the problem we found was, on the soil, since that no-till soil holds its shape better, that when you move it, it stays. And it takes a little more energy to move. So we got force coming from our opener discs to the side to create the slot. And we had some weight on our gauge wheels going down. Or this energy meets, you get sidewall compaction out here. And that causes, so when that plant grows up, the roots will literally grow in that V slot, but they can't get out that sidewall because that dirt's been compacted. So we found trial and error. We found how much down pressure we can run to maintain seed depth without creating so much down pressure that we're creating sidewall compaction. So you got to keep an eye on that as well. The other part of it was our closing wheels. With the rounded closing wheels, what would happen is you would close the top of the seed, but you'd leave an air pocket. And what we found on that was, with that air pocket, that allowed water to infiltrate quick. Now that our openers and our gauge wheels kind of smeared this sidewall, it almost sealed it up a little bit. So that air pocket would fill with water, and then it would have a very hard time getting out of there because this dirt around that seed was very compacted and very tight. So then it would drown out the seed. So once we fixed our down pressure problem, got that appropriate. Now the new planter has the pneumatic downforce. It's got a gauge that tells me roughly 100 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever my weight per row unit is. So I can just pump it up, get to that level, and go from there. And kind of make some mental notes like, okay, 150 really worked good for me. And 200s, 150 got me there. 200 might have been okay as well. 250 might have been the upper limit on some of the ground. On the closing wheel side of it, if I could start from scratch all over, year one, I would invest in some cogged closing wheels. And what happens is the cogged closing wheels kind of take that gear tooth and punch through that compacted sidewall to get a good tuck the dirt in around the seed. And so we are going to go to cogged closing wheels to help fight that, because what we were doing was, as you put more down pressure on the row unit to get that slot open, then you needed more closing wheel pressure to try and close that slot. So then once you put more closing wheel, then that almost lifts up, that transfers weight from the seed openers. So then we had more down, and it was just a spiral into heck with it. So I think we can solve many issues by just year one, put at least one cogged wheel or a drag chain, but I'd definitely go to a cogged wheel on one side. Yetter has several different types. I might look to see if I can't try some of their paddle wheels. There's them Copperhead Ags, one subscriber recommended. Just something that kind of punch that side of the seed trench to get rid of that compaction. You can find sidewall compaction very easy when the corn gets big. In the middle of summer, you know, waist high, shoulder high, go out with a shovel and pop it up. And you will see, if you have sidewall compaction, when you pull that plant root out of the ground, it will look like a mohawk. Plain as it'll be wide up here, and it'll just, as it just comes like that. It'll be a mohawk up here in the seed trench because it could not get out the sides. So it just grew with the seed trench. The other part with the trash whips, I'll go back a little bit here, I forgot all about that, was on soybeans they're forgiving enough. So on soybeans, this is our dirt, this is all corn trash. Going in with soybeans, we've had it where the row cleaner just simply could not move the amount of trash that was there. You'd stop the combine during corn harvest, let it clean out to inspect something. So you got that mountain of trash there. So the planter actually climbed up on top of the residue. In soybeans, that's okay. Corn, not good at all. It climbed on top of the residue. It planted the seed 2 inches or an inch above the soil, but luckily that residue had enough moisture in it that it still germinated the soybean seed, and it was no big deal. If that was corn, that's a huge deal. That is not good at all. Corn needs to be in the dirt. The other thing with residue in corn, if we don't do a good job of cleaning residue, is we get hairpinning of residue. And so we got our little piece of corn stalk that didn't get cut, and it just kind of went into, let me zoom in here, the piece of corn residue, and you got your little kernel sitting on top. What's going to happen is a couple things. Is one, if it's super wet, water can wick down that residue and drown the guy out. And if it's dry, one, it's not at depth. That residue actually is like a spring and holds it out of depth. And two, if it's super dry, that corn residue will act as a wick and take moisture right out of that, and then you got a dead seed. So that getting a clean strip ahead of the planter for the row unit is super important. Either chop the stalks or combine with a non-chopping head and leave the stalks taller. Do whatever you need to do. Get a chopping head, but you got to get it clean. We got to watch that down pressure, play with it. 100% I would invest in a good down pressure kit. Find a used pneumatic system out there, buy a new pneumatic system. Shoop and John Deere, Case IH, White, whoever you're going through has a down pressure spring kit. Get a good adjustable one that and work with it. Spend time walking behind the planter, making sure you're maintaining that depth. And you'll see it on the row units. Down pressure, they just kind of ride like this. No down pressure, they're like that. Invest in a good closing wheel to make sure we can get that seed trench closed. Don't move dirt. I think we've covered the planter pretty good. And then, of course, all your basic, make sure your meter's in good shape. Make sure the soil's in good shape, that we don't have the water or drainage issues. We don't have major fertility issues to correct. We don't have compaction issues that we're fighting. Make sure all that's in good shape. Hold on, I got to get a drink here. Please forgive me. Nothing quenches my thirst better than a good Mountain Dew while talking about farming and sustainability and stewardship. Back to it. Chemical side of it. Our other implement that we use for the farm is a sprayer. Weed control in no-till. My first couple years, I was like, piece of cake. This is nothing. I used my same program and nothing. Well, now we have Roundup Ready weeds this year. So we are going to use pretty much a 90% program that I would on my conventional ground or my neighbor's conventional ground. We're going to be using the same programs. We never had dandelions before. And now that we've gone to no-till these last 2 years, we've had a tremendous dandelion crop. And that is very frustrating because dandelions are as tough as nails. And I don't really like using a lot of chemical. So that's kind of my downfall, is trying to go to no-till. Where them dandelions, for a couple bucks an acre, I could take the mulch master and wipe that dandelion field out clean. But trying to stay on the no-till side or without disturbing the soil too much, we go to the chemical side. So we are learning that a good pre-emerge for corn and beans is priceless, especially on soybeans. A good pre-emerge, get out there early, do a good burn down so them dandelions don't even have a chance to get going. The other weed we used to always fight was late season foxtail. Now we have late season ragweed, Palmer amaranth, and water hemp. So a second post-emerge or a second residual. So the first residual, and what that is, a pre-emerge, if you're a non-farmer, is it's a chemical that makes a barrier on top of the dirt. The only plant that can come through that is the plant that you're planting for soybeans. So we will use a product like Enlight. It is a fantastic pre-emerge for our area for soybeans. It does a great job of burn down, has a great residual. So that makes a barrier. So the only thing that comes through is the soybeans. All other weeds, they come up, they hit the Enlight, and they die. But that only lasts for so long. So you got good strength here. It's stopping weeds. As its potency wears, as the spring goes on, pretty soon you start to get some weeds that can break through. So before that happens, as it's diving down, now we need to come with our post-emerge herbicide. And so as this one's getting weak, now we start over with our post-emerge, so the weeds can kind of break through that Enlight. But now our second Thundermaster is one that I like. So that Thundermaster is right there on top to stop them from getting through. And then that will last for several weeks. Hopefully by the time that one wears weak, our crop is canopied and it's stopping it back. At that point, we have to look at our label of Roundup. Can we go in with Roundup or some other harder chemicals that don't have any residual? If you start to see some of them Roundup resistant weeds or just late season weeds, grasses coming through because of the goofy weather patterns we're in now, while they're tiny, we can go out there with a late season product and try and clean them up. But we have to watch the label to see, is there enough time between our late season application and next spring so we don't herbicide damage our corn the next year. On the corn side, same thing. We got Break Free ATZ as a DuPont product. It's a little pricey, but it works very well. Lumax works very well. On the post side of it, we have Realm Q. It's another DuPont product. I kind of like the DuPont products. They work very well for me. They're a little pricey, but they got some safeners in them, and I have never gotten burnt by using them. That is super important to me. I am not a big chemical guy. I do not know a lot of chemicals by heart, so I use what's worked for me. And then you kind of got to rotate modes of action. But it takes a lot more scouting on weeds on the no-till side. After several years, you're going to start to see new weeds coming in, different timing of weeds, and so we're just going to eliminate that. Post-emerge, done. We're clean, we're good to go. But your first couple years, if you don't want pre and post emerges and you want to still stay on a cheap herbicide program, you're going to have some learnings there. I think failures of weed control and no-till, I don't really call them failures because the weeds are moving along so fast. You know, it seems like we're always having changes of weed control. I don't know. I think there ain't a whole lot to talk about on the chemical side. The biggest failures of no-till are going to come from up here. Is your heart really in it? Do you want no-till to work? Let's make sure, let's make sure that that planter is set up to clean that residue, cut through that soil, maintain our seed depth, and close it. We need to have the planter do its job well. I think that covers it, guys. I don't know what more to say. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this helps somebody do a good job in looking to transition to no-till. Thank you very much for watching.